Hi, all. Welcome to another one of our webinars. We are today going to be talking about Release 2, R2 of 2021. So really what this is let's talk about this. Let's be realistic. Let's be really transparent about what we can anticipate and also maybe some of those little things that, quite honestly, you just need to learn because maybe you haven't done this before. So we have brought in one of our very wonderful consultants. Kelsey, why don't you come out and join me for a second? So Kelsey's been with Syssero here, and she is just been a shining star. So we wanted to give her the opportunity to elevate and empower her by talking about her experience being an end user, tips and tricks, what she's experienced, and then also just give you some insight on what we can anticipate. So Kelsey, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So let's be realistic here. Okay, we get these two releases from Workday. We're super excited about it. Of course, we want to uptake it, but really, how much time should your team be dedicating to this? Is this going to be an overhaul? And what can we anticipate?
Yeah, so it's a lot of information. I remember when we first went live at one of my first companies, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much information. These spreadsheets are gigantic, and what do you mean I have to redo all of my testing that I just got done doing when we went live with Workday? And so it seemed like such a daunting task. And once you broke it down, then you can start to build out what works best for you, your organization, for your team, whether how involved your HR partners are with it, things like that. So at a bare minimum, there is some testing that will need to be done. But first and foremost, you need to start going through what's even going to be coming out. So there's the announcing Workday 2021 and release 2 information that's out available on the community. That gets released about a month before any of the information is available in the preview tenant. So with that, you can open that up. It does break it down into all the different functional areas. You have government, education, HCM, recruiting, but that's still a lot. So the first things I like to do is I delete out the tabs that don't pertain to my organization in our Workday instance. So for example, if I'm in an industry that is not government and not education, those go away. Not even going to look at that detail. If I'm in an organization that does not have Workday payroll, I will get rid of that tab. And then one of the tabs, HCM, it has a lot of detail in there. And I like to break, HCM covers a whole range of things in Workday. So my brain doesn't function at, let's look at everything at one time. I like to take it module by module. So what I have to do then is I'll go through HCM, that tab, and then I break it down even more so into the sub areas. So there's a column that says absence, and I'll tell you, like column 5 actually, I believe is on there, that it'll say if it's ABS, if it's TME, you can start to go through those and say, yep, this is an absence, this is time off related, this is leave related. I will even separate off time off versus leave because those different sets of configurations. So I'll break it down that way and create sub tabs. That way I can focus on what update is coming to each specific module, what changes are being automatically delivered. Those ones I like to highlight and call those out and really look at those first and foremost because they're automatic. They're coming whether you're ready or not. So let's take a further deep into those, look into those, really test those heavier, review it to make sure it's not going to break any of my current configurations. And then I do want to keep in mind though, the setup required steps, what's coming with those features, because a lot of people think that they have to do it all at once. I remember my first time, I thought I had to do it right now, whether it's setup required or not. Let's get that enabled and ready to go for when the enhancement hits the production environment. Nope. Best practice, don't uptick any enhancements during the preview window. Roadmap those out. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But rest assured, you don't have to tackle everything at one time. So I do like to break it down first and foremost to review and understand what is coming. Another thing I like to do then is to take that and start to plan that information out. So on our next slide here that we're showing is talking through the timeline. What does that look like? You have a 5-week window. So when we're talking to the release 2 here that's coming out, that's going to be hitting our preview tenant on August 7th. That Saturday morning, it will be available, and you have all the way until Friday evening of September 10th. You have 5 weeks for testing. So what does that look like? Let's break out that timeline, and we can, in a little bit later, we'll dig into that further. But first, you do have 5 weeks. So you've got time. Let's isolate that. Let's look at it. Let's involve our key players.
But let's be realistic. 5 weeks sounds great and all. But what if I am just, this HRIS team of one and I already have so many other firefights that I'm going through? I've heard it said before, and I'm going to kind of tease you here, is like, we've said this even, is, well, the big dogs, we talk about the power of one, Workday's all-in-one code, these big organizations that have a release management person, this is all they do, is doing this information. Mm-hmm. So do we really need to be doing all this work? And what does that look like? Kind of tease that out for me.
Yep. So I've been there. Obviously, I've been on the end client, and I have that experience of being that sole support, being that one and only. I'm dealing with the break fixes, all the projects. I've been there. And that is where I would advise from a perspective of, don't just rely on the big dogs. You can for a little bit, but not everything. Because guess what? Though it is the power of one, you have custom built processes. There is some, not custom, configurable processes that you've upticked that they haven't. You might be using some custom worker objects that are specific to you in your organization. Condition rules, how those route, and all your security roles. Most chances you're not using just the Workday delivered security roles and how the processes flow. So you do need to test. And you can't, so where I like to do is rely a little bit on the big dogs is the fact that out on the community, there is the Workday Release Center. I use that prep center. I use it all the time in the past to keep an eye on the Q&A section, the issues sections. They have those broken out. So you can see everybody else that's in the system testing. Oh, they're having an issue with this one. Okay, let's make note. I need to test this. I'm not going to rely that it's just failing for them. I need to double check. How's it going to impact me and my organization and my end users and my HR team members? I need to see how it's going to play out. So let's go in and do a quick test there. Those big dogs can help call out those other errors that are coming about and that they're seeing with their tests, but that doesn't mean it's going to fail for you. That doesn't mean that you might not have other failures. So at the very minimum, what I like to do for testing is to do week 1, when release is first out there, get everybody out of sandbox and sandbox preview. Don't let anybody else in. Isolate that down to just you and your core team of people, whoever, if you have more, or if you're a sole support, then let it just be you. Run a pay calc and complete the payroll. Do that both in sandbox and sandbox preview. And then you're going to run your reports out of both tenants. Okay, set those aside for right now. Unless there's any errors when trying to complete it, just set those aside for right now. Launch all of your integrations, both in Sandbox and Sandbox Preview. Run your reports, download the reports, see if there's any errors at first. If there's no giant errors that everything did at least successfully run, set your reports aside. Run security checks. Go in, proxy in this people, look at your view security groups, compare and contrast in the two Sandbox and Sandbox Preview. And if there's no giant errors, all right, now you can take a step back. You can let people start. If there's others that need to use Sandbox, because I'm not going to lie, Sandbox gets used on a daily basis. People checking, hey, what does this look like? Let me play around with this real quick, because they want to do it first in Sandbox before they do it in production. They do it on a daily basis. So, okay, let's let them loose in Sandbox again, normal processes. Now I can take all those reports that I just generated and do VLOOKUPs, do comparisons, do pivot tables, analyze the data. Is everything matching up? exactly in sandbox preview? If so, you're good. Take a breather for a second. Those are the first initial things. That's the business critical. You need your stuff secured. You need integrations to be able to launch, and you need to process payroll. All right. So at least with the initial release of preview of the releases in your preview tenant, you've passed the initial critical items. You can take a breath there. All right.
And I'm pretty sure, Kelsey, we're planning on providing this out to any viewers or anybody that wants to. It's kind of like, here's a tips and tricks, calendar view, step by step, what we anticipate you should probably be tackling. So, of course, I'm sure people are foolishly like, oh, this is great material, I want this. But we've put this together from a PDF perspective to kind of give a guidance, obviously, in conjoining efforts with what we're already provided with Workday Community.
Yep. Exactly. These will be available because there is a lot of great information out there that I provided, lessons learned, tips and tricks, different things like this on the slide deck. So definitely know that this is available to re-reference. I was one that as I was going through it, I printed off things from the community. I reached out as much information as I could find, and I didn't have the time to deal with it at that moment. So I wanted to print it off. I'm a paper person. Sorry. I'm a paper person. So I'll print it off to re-reference as I'm going through these things. So do know that there is the supporting documentation. It even includes links to the community, helpful things that I have used personally, I still use to this day. I will look up at that information. They have project plans out there. You know, they are generic, but guess what? They have to be. And then you build them out from there. You work with your organization. You know your system as you guys continue. It's an evolving document, those project plans and test scripts. So keep going forward and adapting things. What's out there, know that it's some of it's very general, or maybe it might be specific to an organization. Well, how could it relate to you maybe? Think through those different options and how could it relate? What's this issue? Does it pertain to you guys? Test it if you're unsure, you know. There is a lot of that information available. So as we're talking through those absolute must-dos, I talked about doing it on week 1.
I was just going to say, we got a new slide. So this is so if you, I mean, quite honestly, you clearly know what you're talking about. And, you know, being somebody that's also been in your shoes, it can be overwhelming. So if you do absolutely nothing else, this is the list of just take this and run with it, right?
Yeah, at the very minimum, because these are your business critical items. If these items fail, then if you can't get people paid, have their checks going out, having their benefit contributions going into their 401k and being funded, things like that, you're going to have issues, and then you're going to be dealing with a lot of aftermath. So that's where, to me, in my mind, everything I've learned up to this point, if you are so swamped you can't do anything else, at least do these. Do it twice. All right. I talked through doing it week 1. Things change during that 5-week period. Preview tenant is not the same. What's going to be released, because of everything else that's being tested and possible things failing or issues or bugs that are coming up through all of us customers testing it, Workday is going to pull some of the things back. They might make changes. They might make fixes. So it's always recommended to request to have your preview tenant refreshed during week 4.
And that's one of those safe harbor moments that we're used to hearing from, right? Is, hey, we have all these wonderful things coming out, but safe harbor.
Exactly.
This is truly our opportunity, code of one, power of one, to go in there and kind of break it. And sometimes, quite honestly, the clients do, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. There's releases that I was super excited to see that feature coming out, and it got pulled. And it got pulled last minute. But they do it they do it to benefit us. They do it because they discovered a flaw, or customers are discovering the flaws, and they're not going to release something that's going to fail for us. They want to make sure they are safe. They always do that safe harbor to try to benefit us as the end users as much as possible. So they're pulling things not because they just feel like it. They're doing it because of a reason, because it's not working as they expected it to, because the masses are doing the test. That's normal for even our day-to-day configurations that we're doing and projects we're working on. We pull in others to test, end users, we pull in those things for testing. This is Workday's releasing it for UAT testing. That's really what we're doing. So things do get pulled. So that's where I recommend having that refresh on week 4. So then week 5, tell everybody hands out of sandbox again. Lock them out again. If they can't stay out on their own, you can lock them out. You can change, lock all their accounts. I've done it. I couldn't trust some people. So I got in and I did that. I locked them. Ran my pay calc and pay complete, run my reports in both tenants, set it aside. Integrations, set those reports aside. Testing security, then go back and confirm, do all my VLOOKUPs, pivot tables, all of that, and make sure everything's looking good. Business critical, focus on those business critical items. Because at the end of the day, if you can't, like I said before, if you can't get people paid, you're going to have an issue and you're going to hear a lot about it. So we got to make sure that those are working. That'll at least give you the breath that, okay, I can at least get through payroll. We're good there. If anything else, you got that covered.
So, we talk about this must do, locking people out. Can you give us like an idea of how long that used to take you and what that looked like, so we can give people okay, if you have to do bare minimum, what is this going to look like for your actual, block off your calendars, tell your management, hey, I need to do this, and what that might look like as well?
Yes. So obviously for payroll, you got to depend on how much time it takes to run those pay calcs. Do they take 5 minutes? Do they take an hour or 2? All right. So you do have that to keep in mind. But some of the companies I've worked for, max we're talking 30, 40 minutes. So then I've been able to at least run all my integrations, run the payroll. I've done that in a single day. And then sometimes I've analyzed, even had a chance to start to look at the reports. Security, set that aside for at least another day. So 2 days for week 1, and again, 2 days for week 2 to really focus on that. If for anything else, block your calendar, make sure that you're staying focused, because if you keep having interruptions, these 3 items are critical. You want to be focused. You want to make sure that you're not missing something and, you forgot to come back to it, or you misread your information because you didn't finish the formula or the pivot table you were in the middle of creating. Finish, focus, and work on it and get it done. If you do that, you can spend 4 days out of the entire 5 weeks really focused on that information. And then during that time frame, though, keep an eye on community. Keep, at least a couple times a week, jump back into community, see if there's any new posts. You just go to that preparation center, look in the issues section, look in that Q&A section, and just scroll through those first couple or the top couple of posts that have been coming out each day, that you may have missed since the last time you checked it. That's where I would really advise you to look at that. At the bare minimum, do those items.
So I know there's somebody watching this and they're like, that is a bunch of what, because I have not done any of what you've told us to do here, and we have been just fine. So how would you have that conversation, and how would you say, okay, let's be realistic here? Because I know I've been in the shoes where I've actually had a conversation. They said, hey, we've been hunky-dory. Everything's been good the last 2 years. I haven't had to spend any time on testing. I absolutely love Workday. It's the best. And then, of course, I have a lot of anxiety, and I'm sure you do with me even saying that. So can you give, for those that are watching, why should we spend the time to do this because of the power of one?
Yes. So let me tell you, I have been very fortunate in the fact that I have found very few failures. I've done these tests and I've lucked out where I haven't had that many failures ever. I can't really recall any major ones, maybe 1 or 2, but there are ones that other customers caught and it ended up getting dropped from the release. So one, you're helping to contribute to Workday's overall experience and making sure that you're one of their partners. Every one of us has a say with Workday. That's why they have the community. We are a part of them, so make sure that your voice is being heard, that if you're running into failures, let us know. I religiously go out to community to look at stuff, to see what other errors, if other people are running into the same issues I am, because otherwise some might be sitting in their own head thinking, I'm going crazy. What's happening? Am I just overthinking this? So that's one, is being a partner to all the other Workday customers along with Workday. But two, then also you could also be very fortunate in the fact that you might have some configurations that are very specific to your tenant that didn't break. How long do you want to rely on your luck? At some point, luck has a tendency to wear out. And do you want to be the one having to answer to your employees because they didn't get paid? Do you want to be the one struggling last minute trying to do break fixes on company-wide changes? No, the release is going to come. It's going to come and go very quickly. It's going to hit our tenants, every one of us at the same time. But you might have something special in your tenant that nobody else has maybe. And that might be the one thing that breaks because Workday doesn't own addressing some of those custom fields. So make sure that you don't let your luck run out and do your due diligence and at least test these business critical items.
Absolutely. And I think, so I have actually a personal experience fighting a fire last minute because someone didn't do their due diligence. And it was one of those deprecated fields. Workday finally deprecated it after warning you over and over and over. We're deprecating it. It's happening. And it finally hit during the release. And it was, of course, one of those key fields on an Active Directory integration that just bombed out for everyone. So no one could get into email for the whole company. So I specifically have had that experience. I know, to your point, it ran out on luck and it was super frustrating. But hey, you know what? It was lessons learned. Yes. Of course, I think at that point they hired a release management manager after that. So, hey, lessons learned. We moved in the right direction. So
yes, exactly.
When we talk about minimal work needed to be successful, we have to talk about the must-haves. So I think we have a slide out here about what does that look like to be successful? What can we anticipate? And, what can we do from a setting of expectations, especially for this specific release?
Yes. So we have a slide that has, and it's also one of those downloadable ones that you can have access to, that we've actually gone out and mapped out the actual calendar for you as to what I've done and what I'm, working with some of my clients on, even now, what that testing window looks like, prepping ahead of time, at least knowing what's going to be released, having those conversations with those key HR members to say, hey, did you know this is coming out? We've had an open ticket for months to fix this one piece. And actually, instead of trying to figure out a workaround, there's a new feature coming out that's going to solve that. So how about we hold off on that for a little bit longer to see if it's going to come out with this release so we don't have to build this weird workaround for it. That's one thing, is paying attention and planning that information out. And then working through who has availability. So if you actually are able to do more than just that must-have list, if you're able to do further testing past those very business critical items, you can do what's called regression testing. So a lot of people might not know what regression testing is, and that's going in and testing your current processes as is to make sure that they continue to work as you expect them to, as they are in today's world, testing through that. So there's times when you might need to pull in some of your HR members, HR partners, benefit partners. Hey, let's toss in some benefit life events. Does it flow? Do you still have the same fields that you normally do? Does it look any different? Things like that. And so making sure to partner with them. Do they have time available to be able to help out? That's where if you start to plan ahead of time in July, for the upcoming release that's coming here this fall, then you can give them a heads up that, hey, mid-August, right around the 10th, 12th, I'm going to need some help. Can you make sure to block your calendar and limit your meetings during that time frame so that we can do some testing? Hey, guess what? Benefits is also we're gearing up for open enrollment. You're going to have to work with their schedules as well. So making sure that you are truly partnering with your other users so that they have availability to help test or to walk through scenarios that maybe you might have to step up and do their testing for them. If you're newer to the organization, maybe you don't know all of their processes and what should or should not work, this is a great opportunity to learn them and to partner with those end users, your benefits, your HR, your recruiters, and learn that process with them and walk through that. So whether you're new into your system or you've been there for a while. Make sure to partner is a big thing.
And, not that I'm going to name drop by any stretch of the imagination, but there are companies out there that automate some of this testing. And we can go ahead and, if you do have the budget, if you're thinking about making this into something that's more strategic, is that you can tap onto actual partners of Workday that have built out the Selenium scripts, that have done the techie knowledge to make this so you could say, here's our process, and we just need to make sure it hits all of these steps every time, so that every time you're really pushing a button, maybe a little bit more than that, but at least getting us to that, right?
Oh, yes. I've always kept those partners in the back of my mind, like, oh, end goal right there. I want to get to that point. I want to be able to work with them and I want to have the time to build out those test scripts. Well, guess what? You can start to help get yourself to that point, maybe by building out your test scripts and continuing to add to them with each release. Maybe this first release coming up here that you're working on, you can only focus on those absolute must-dos. That's all you have time for this time. Okay. Now, next release that comes out next February, let's maybe plan a little bit more. Let's see if I can get in some additional regression testing, maybe 5 tests per functional area. What tests do you want to build out? And start to build that test script out and what it looks like. That's where you will really be able to start, because guess what? Turning straight to one of those partners to say, yes, let's automate that testing, it's an amazing thing. But if you're not prepared, if you don't even have the time to put into some of those test scripts now, you're not going to have the time to devote to really make that the most effective, efficient usage, and making sure that you're getting everything you can out of it. Because I've seen those automations work. Oh, such a relief off the shoulders, big weight off your shoulders, that that they're at least doing your regression testing. They're pushing the buttons, and within an hour or two, regression testing's done, and you're looking at a pretty spreadsheet of passes and failures or slight issues that then you can focus on those and just have to look at that. Saves so many hours and hours of work. But start now. If you don't have it in your budget at this time yet, start to build it out. Start to prepare yourself. So when maybe you can finally get it in your budget to do that, awesome. You already have most of your test scripts documented. You'll always do more when it comes to those working with those vendors and thinking through things that you never thought of before. But guess what? You at least have a foundation. You have something to start off with instead of starting from scratch. It'll make it so much easier.
And on the topic of automation, so we do have automatic, like, hey, Workday's pushing this. You have no option. You're going to have to absorb this.
Yes.
So are there things this release we could start thinking about as part of this? And obviously for this slide specifically is, talking about those automatically available, what should we be taking in consideration while we think through that?
Yes. So one of the ones I want to call out right now, Workday Safe Harbor. Definitely Workday Safe Harbor, because I'm hoping that they're just kind of trying to push it a little bit this time, but then they're going to pull it out. They're not going to deprecate it. But one of the big things is, I believe Workday 32 it was, during that release, they came out with a new benefits enrollment event. What it looks more like our mobile apps. It has the boxes. They're going to be, and if you didn't want to uptake that, you could check a box on your tenant setup and continue with the old process, where it was more of a grid of more like an Excel spreadsheet where you walked through a couple different pages saying, here's your medical event, your health ones, here's your HSAs, your FSAs, walking through those page by page. That option is, at this point in time, based off the announcing feature considerations, they're looking at getting rid of that checkbox. So from what I've read, Workday Safe Harbor, keeping that out there. But if you're still using the old benefits, I would suggest, if you can uptick to that new one this time, even if they let it roll to where you can still work on getting to that newer version, because they're eventually going to be deprecating it. We need to keep moving forward so that we're all on the system of one, power of one. That's where that comes from. These automatically available is helping to keep everybody on track with these new features that they can continue to support. So that's probably the biggest one, because I know I've had prior clients and customers that they didn't like the newer view. They liked that old view. It was step by step. Let's focus on health. Let's focus on this, page by page. They didn't like the newer version. Well, I've sent a couple messages out already to say, hey, we might need to take this on, or even, people that I've worked with in the past. Did you know that this is going to go away? Heads up, keep a lookout for those things. There's a report out there, and within our slide deck, if you download it, it does have the link to all of the report fields that are going to be deprecated also, that have been deprecated in the past. You brought up that great example, Amber, of a field was deprecated, but it was still on your Active Directory integration. It was still feeding over and you got errors. Take a look at that, because you might be surprised at how many fields you didn't think had been already retired and deprecated, and you're still attempting to use them, and that either that field's airing out or the entire report or integration is airing out, depending on how you have it built. So it might be set to fail because of a single error. So make sure to look at that.
And that can go across your whole system. So I know integration seems to be the doom and gloom. It could totally bomb out your integration, but it could be as simple as a condition rule or a validation rule that's just changing your user acceptance and your user experience, quite honestly, right? So it's, to your point, it could hit anything. And that's always the gotcha. You don't know until you look at that report.
Exactly. And one of the things Workday has started to do, they're coming out more, they're building it out, is separated out some of those bigger domains into smaller functional spaces. Like the talent, I believe, is one of the ones that's coming out this time, that it's now I know, super excited that, so therefore you can isolate your security even more so specifically to just talent. Even if it's a domain that goes across the whole organization, let's say something worker data related, goes across the whole organization. So you might want to be hesitant to open it up, but you really need that one field in talent, how they're breaking out the security, and that is something that's going to be automatically available, is that you'll be able to open it up to just that one area. So your talent manager or some of those talent workers can look at that, see that one field, and still be able to function in their jobs without opening the whole system up. They're going to continue to do that. So eventually they're going to deprecate those older fields. It's going to come. So we just need to make sure that you're staying relevant on that information, staying on the community. If you haven't subscribed into some of their groups, the HCM, security, get those emails from Workday community, read through them. I have mine marked for, it was either daily digest or weekly digest. I made sure if I didn't have time to look at them for a week, I'd save them in a folder, and then I'd go, made myself at least once a week, go through and look at what came out in those email communications. Was there something I should be paying attention to? Make sure that you're using the resources that are available. Work with some of your partners. Syssero is one that we empower. We want to empower all of our clients. We want to share information. So maybe tap on those resources that you have and say, hey, maybe I don't know where to look. Can you help point me in the right direction? I feel I'm lacking in this information. Maybe it's security because of this big release that's going to keep coming. They're going to keep doing it for every functional area. So what are some resources I can use? What should I be watching? Is there something you can walk me through to make sure I'm understanding it correctly so I can help support that going forward? Take advantage of it. If you don't have a resource, community, Workday community, everybody's got it. Put out there. People reply on that on a constant basis. Sometimes you might get a question that doesn't get answered. I've had that only happen, honestly, very few times. Otherwise, I've been fortunate enough to keep getting posts on questions I've asked and answered. So,
and I'm totally going to volunteer you for this. So be forewarned, is that I will say, Kelsey, you and I talked about this earlier too. So, but for those that are watching this, if you want to reach out and ask Kelsey questions, because she's experienced this firsthand from an end user's perspective, as a consultant, please reach out to her. She's happy to answer questions. Mm-hmm. And then, talking about the road mapping, let's be realistic. If you are new to Workday, or I think the security example is a great example of saying, hey, Workday gave me all this great new functionality. There is no way that I'm going to be able to absorb it in the few weeks that I have before it's now going to be released. And I'm going to have to talk to my stakeholders, maybe my business partners, and partner with them. What does that look like from a roadmap perspective, as well as from a feature release? And how do I navigate that effectively? Because I feel like it's okay, you gave me the bare minimum. And then I have all these other things that sound, well, here's my apparently long laundry list for the rest of the year. So how do I start tackling that through, and what does that look like?
Yes, that's a great question, because I've been there with the 200 plus laundry list of break fixes, nice to have enhancements, all of that. But then we come out with all these new releases, and where do they fit? How do I fit? What I do is I'll take my list of 200 plus items, whatever that is for you. Everyone has that pile of open tickets to work on and hopeful things to do. Break it up by functional area. Take all of the enhancements that came out with this release. Maybe the release before, if you weren't even able to uptake those. Grab the ones for each functional area and meet with your team, your partners. Go to your total rewards director, your benefits director, your recruiting director. Sit with them, have those one-on-one conversations and say, this is what you currently have on your wish list. This is what is coming out for enhancements. Talk through maybe some of the new enhancements can solve some of those and they're quick wins. Ooh, let's map those out. You can't hit every quick win at one time. So let's spread out the quick wins all throughout maybe the next 4 to 6 months. Get those updated, hit the quick wins. But you also have bigger projects that maybe it's going to take a little bit more work, such as the security overhaul. You might need to work with your IT team. You might have to work with your compliance team to make sure that what you're changing for security is approved by your organization. You need to make sure to have those conversations. So maybe that's a bigger project. Try to see if the timing allows, along with your other projects. Let's review the priorities. Is this a bigger priority than maybe something that's already slated to be worked on in Q3? Okay, nope, not yet. Okay, do we have time? Nope. Okay, what about Q4? Try to work those in and realize that some of your company's current priorities might need to shift simply because some of these enhancements will actually solve a bigger issue right off the bat. So that's where you really need to partner with your team, talk through it with them, be transparent. That maybe one of their projects, that is a really great, nice to have. I agree. But the functionality might not be there in Workday, and it's going to take more effort. But guess what? Workday, I'm provided a link out there also for what Workday's road mapping, even for the next release. So keep looking for the future. Look at those to say, do you know what? Right now there's roadmap maybe for the release 1 in 2022. There's actually a solution for that. It's obviously safe harbor, always safe harbor, but they might be trying to hit something for that first release in 2022. So how about we not hit this project in Q4? What if we waited to see what does come about, with that first release, and maybe try to tackle that Q2? Maybe we could still squeeze it into Q1, but maybe, let's wait for Q2. I'm one that some of those bigger releases that come out with each of the Workday updates, I don't always like to take them on immediately. I remember back when they first went live with the Outlook integration for scheduling interviews, there were some glitches that happened and some user experience issues that not everybody knew was going to happen. That it's just getting familiar with it and getting comfortable with that process. I didn't want to take that on right away because I was the sole support. I wasn't going to be able to stay up to date with, even if I went live with it, all of the little things, teaching my team. I didn't have the time available to do that. So I waited for another 6 months for, I think, an extra release to finally say, okay, now let's start looking at it. We have a lot of great information out on the community from those bigger fish, from those bigger customers, and not just bigger customers, other customers, smaller, whatever size of Workday that have used that and uptook that release. Let's take all the information they posted out in the community and let's roll with it. I think we're ready for it. It started to smooth out. Everyone's understanding it. They've built out processes. Some of them have even documented it. Hey, let's talk to maybe some of those customers. Let's reach out on the community and see if someone's willing to have a meeting and maybe show you or walk you through their lessons learned. That's the joy of Workday.
Yep.
I'm telling you my lessons learned. I'm not the only one. There's thousands and thousands of us.
Yes.
So reach out on community.
Yeah, and I think that's where you can, to community, you should have, a, client success manager that you've interacted with from a Workday perspective. So you have those avenues, leverage those. Quite honestly, I always tell people like, hey, Workday is not the cheapest, but it is, in my mind, the coolest software to be working on within HR. And you have a lot of tools to leverage. So leverage them where you can.
You brought up a great point with the customer success managers. I was one head down, I didn't use them as much as I should have. There was times where it's like, okay, I don't know where else to go to. I'm going to go to my customer success manager. And I've been fortunate. I had some amazing ones with Workday. And it was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I go to you a month ago? Well, and then they realized I walked through what my plans were and my roadmaps. And guess what? They helped connect me with some of their clients, that were even in the area. Hey, my CHRO wasn't understanding something or wants to see, is it really going to take that much effort to, configure something? Or here's the end user experience. Well, they want to experience it firsthand. So guess what? We scheduled a meeting and we went to a local company that was our same customer success manager, met us there, had that meeting, opened that conversation. And it's like, wow, we were able to partner face to face with them. And it was amazing. So use those customer success managers, whether they are your Workday ones, or if you're partnering with, Syssero, we have our success manager that she's amazing, great resources available. If they don't know the information, they're going to make sure to get you in touch with those that can.
Yep, that's exactly what they're there for. And then you said something earlier that I want to kind of reverse engineer is, if you're obviously a one-woman show in the HRIS world, yeah, you may not want to uptick it, but maybe this is a make or break towards, hey, a business added value. There's a lot of things where working with your, customer success manager and being able to have that conversation to say, we need this as an organization to really elevate who we are. Workday has done it in the past, and I'm sure they're still doing it, where they bring people in as a prototype to say, hey, work through us with the kinks. Let's go and do this together. Yes. And see what that looks like.
Yes, that's been extremely helpful. They're also one, to get you to the office hours or to get you to, review and recommend. I've been where, hey, our recruiting area, there's a lot of great releases that just came out with recruiting the last couple of releases. It's just been amazing how much more they've been improving that. And I knew our recruiting instance was nowhere where it needed to be. It was so much manual intervention. Our configuration wasn't good to begin with. What can we do when I walked into that? And we partnered with them, to do a review and recommend. You can do that. That's always great to work with them, work with us. We do review and recommends as well when we get into our clients and take a look and walk through ways to say, okay, there's some releases that I was in an organization that they didn't review those releases for quite a while. So, okay, you've missed out on so much. Let's see what's our biggest pain points. Is it an end user perspective? Sometimes it is. Let's fix those manager dashboards. So much great work there. The time off calendars, people not being able to see their team's time off. Hey, guess what? There was a new dashboard a while back for that. Let's get that enabled. There's some of those quick wins that make such an impact to your end users, the day-to-day workers that partner with your teams and understand what are your biggest pain points. Maybe you've been in the team for a while and you know what those are, and they've gotten lost in that laundry list of 200, bring that up. Have those meetings at least once a quarter where you're going back through that information, because it might have gotten tabled for now. And guess what? You didn't realize that they just updated something in the last release and it's now going to fix it. Oh, okay. Let's revisit that. Let's get that addressed. That's where those partnerships, that laundry list, you might not want to bring up that laundry list because, it might not look like you're doing all of your job. I've been there. I felt so guilty about that list, but it happens to everybody. So you're doing your job, just partner with your team, be transparent with them and make sure, have them help you set those priorities. You don't know what their day-to-day activities are. One small fix could maybe save them hours a week. So talk to them. Talk through time savings, work through that, as well as a big thing is understanding the times.
So, I mean, I'm reading your slide here and it says plan for 12 to 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Safe harbor.
I was going to say, okay, so I'm just supposed to, this is my part-time job now. What does that look like from your lens and what you've experienced being on the end client side? And then what are we recommending to our clients and to other clients that are listening in?
Yes. So people think, oh, that 12 to 18 months, that's a lot going on during that time frame. How do you do that? But if you don't know what you're going to be working on for the next quarter, how do you know what to keep an eye out for on community posts? That's one thing. If I know that it's going to be coming, and I have it in the back of my mind, knowing what that roadmap looks like, when comments are coming out on the community or with your vendors and your customer success manager sending you the monthly download blurbs, things like that, pay attention. Then you can pay attention and stay current with that information so you're ready to rock and roll, and that you can keep gathering that info so you're not starting from ground zero when it's time to work on that project or that task. You already have information that you've been gathering all along the way because you might have stumbled across something and knowing, oh, I'm working on that one in Q3. Let's just save this, maybe create a Word document, a folder, shove it in here, and know that it's going to be in my Q3 stuff. That way you're not starting from scratch. You can keep those eyes out. That's one reason, a big reason for me to keep that 12 to 18 month calendar going for roadmaps. But do know it's going to change. It's not set in stone. You're going to all of a sudden have this beautiful roadmap calendar out there, and your executive's going to come to you and say, hey, guess what? We're reorging the entire company. Everything goes on hold. You need to focus on this. Things happen. That's when you say, all right, let's regroup with the team and let's go through the priorities and what can shift, what can pause. Maybe we don't do this as a whole phase, big bang approach. Maybe we break this one into phased approaches. Do the small win now, phase of 2 into Q3, break that up. So that's where keeping that dialogue going with your team, making sure they're aware as to what that looks like. I used to send out my roadmap, at least for the next quarter, on a weekly basis. Hey, heads up. And if someone tries to throw in another project, all right, that's related to total rewards. Hey, total rewards, by the way, you also have these priorities for the next couple quarters. What's going to shift? Because I can't do them all in one time. Something's got to give. What do you want to give, or where does this fit in these orders? Maybe it's too much for just one functional area, and you need to go to the whole broader HR team and say, hey, to your CHRO, to maybe IT, even pull in those senior leaders and say, all right, here's the overall Workday roadmap. And I have these 5 or 6 other requests that have come in recently that are supposedly urgent, top priority items. Something's got to give. I can't do everything here on this list. We need to adjust it. Do know that happens in every organization on a daily basis. Even my daily to-do tasks change on a daily basis. There is that flexibility you need to be able to go with it, but just know, keep those partners pulled in, work with them. And hey, if you got something that, there is no give, you got to do it. Reach out to partners, reach out to your customer success managers, reach out to your vendors. Syssero's one that we can fill in for that project then, hey, we can help configure that. We can take a couple of those things off your plate so that you can still get them done in the time frame that needs to be. So you're not alone.
Yeah.
If you don't have it in your budget to use another vendor or something like that, at least partner with your Workday customer success manager, and they can maybe help get you some resources or some people to talk through to help get you so you're not starting from ground zero.
And I will say, knowing a lot of the vendors in the ecosystem and who started them and being part of my history, is most vendors are willing to just have a conversation, give you free advice, help you out. And in many ways, you might get 1 or 2 free hours. So it's one of those things where I highly recommend, and this coming from the CEO of Syssero, use and abuse those relationships in the best way. We have one code, we have one effort, is to make the system great and keep expanding. So you have the resources. To your point, Kelsey, there's many resources out there, but if it's truly the support you need, I think I saw a blog on the other day was like, hey, free hours. We want to talk to you and talk about it. Leverage whatever you need to do,
Mhm.
especially if you are a one man or woman show, that be able to say, hey, I need help, be able to say and be willing to say, yes, I need help to make that happen.
Yes, definitely. And, keeping an eye out on what's to come. Are there other events? Rising that isn't happening this year. I used to use that a lot too, that I need help with something. Let me sit in some of those groups, or let me see if I can meet with people. I used to meet with several vendors to say, talk through things with them. One, they're trying to get your support, but they're also here just to support Workdays. Workdays being successful, they're going to end up being successful as well. So making sure to use those, that if maybe, such as Rising not happening, if there's other events going on, share-a-thons, different activities that you can enroll in, webinar. I know the payroll user group on Community, they meet, I think, monthly. I used to join those meetings all the time. They go through issues, go through live scenarios as to things they've dealt with. They've gone through the releases themselves as to what they've upticked. Guess what? Something great coming out for payroll is Common Paymaster, that functionality. So making sure to join those free webinars and take advantage of those things.
And I will say, I think I got added on even last week to a Facebook group of Workday payroll, which as you know, I am not a payroll SME by any section, but somebody invited me and I was like, this is hilarious. Not only are we doing things in Community, are we doing our regional user groups, are we using things on LinkedIn, but even Facebook can't get away from the power of one and people just wanting to work together, get information and help each other out. So, I think the share-a-thons are amazing because it gives us the opportunity to elevate all of us and, quite honestly, just help each other out, because it's not rocket science, right? It's just, yeah, I'm sure you've experienced it. If somebody else has experienced it, we can figure it out.
Yes, you're not alone. That's the biggest thing, is even if you're the sole sport, you're not alone. There's an ecosystem truly out there, and you're not the only one experiencing that singular issue. Somebody else, many others have experienced it, might be dealing with it even right now at the very moment.
Yep. So I know you have some lessons learned you've shared on here. And I know we only have about 7 minutes left. So I wanted to kind of touch point on what are the key lessons learned from your experience. And so we can kind of get people ready, because obviously we'll be sharing this out because we want them to have this information. But from your perspective, what are the big lessons learned in your day in application of a big release?
Reviewing what's coming out, making sure that you're at least aware, even if you can't test everything, or even you can't test any of it and you're just doing that absolute must-do list that I provided. At least be aware as to what's coming out. That's just going to help you in your day-to-day configurations, break fixes, things like that, as you go down your laundry list of stuff to do. Just plan and be prepared as to what is coming out. There's times we just had a situation where they were trying to solve for an issue, and it's like, hey, guess what? I know that just got released on the last one. So let's pull up that information. Just at least being aware as to what's coming is so helpful, so that going forward, you have the tools and the knowledge to be able to at least tap into that information. Testing. Building out those test scripts. If you're starting from nothing, start off with, say, a handful of tests per functional area, and every release build from it. Keep adding to it. You're going to learn yourself what's important for your organization, your team, your Workday instance. So it's never stale. You're going to keep making changes every time. So after every release, one thing I liked to do was to go through, okay, were there some tests that I wasn't feeling comfortable about because I didn't test on it? Let's add those in right now before I forget about it. Then they're already documented for the next release. Review that information right after everything's hit production. Give yourself a couple weeks to let things settle. But then that way you're already one giant step more prepared for the next release. So just keep building those blocks up and giving yourself those foundations, and you will keep getting better and better and more confident and more reassured through those processes that come out twice a year. They're going to keep coming. That's the great thing, is they will keep coming, and there's always going to be those changes. So just keep improving your process, that what works for your teams.
Perfect. And I really did like how you added on here communications. Ultimately, I find we have these big releases. We get into this almost mindset, especially if you're in HRIS, of like, okay, we got it done. I talked to my business partners. I figured it out. And you forget about the end user impact. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we have unless it is something like open enrollment in a brand new UI, ultimately, it could be something that's happening on the back end. We forget it's going to impact their reportings and how they see their dashboards or something of the sort. So making sure that we have the communications part of that, the change management part of that involved, if it's something relatively big and does have an end user perspective, or even if it's just a few people itself.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when they came out with the banners, how we could customize the banners. Guess what? I changed the color and failed to communicate. That was one of my lessons learned, is didn't communicate that I changed the color from blue to green. And day one after preview hit prod, and I made those updates because I thought it was really cool. Yeah, everyone thought they were in the wrong system, or hey, what happened to it? Why is it changed? I kind of preferred the other because it was brighter versus the duller color I had chosen. I didn't partner very well with those things. I didn't communicate with the end users that, hey, guess what? We're trying to align with our company colors or things like that. Something as simple as changing a color. Just be communicative about that. People are going to read them. Some people aren't. It is, you will have that. But as long as you're having those communications, then if something does break, you can at least say, well, we did know that. We did send out this document. We did provide step-by-step instructions because the entire process did change, when it came to open enrollment with that first release. It changed all of our documentation that we had our employees using. So we had to update that and release those changes out and communicate that. So that's where you do want to make sure you're thinking of all of your end users, IT, vendors, how they're going to get their files if it's going to change, even your HR team members. It doesn't always mean just your employees and your managers. It could be an internal change to your HR team.
I absolutely agree. And I think that is, a great way we can leave off, because quite honestly, when we think about what we talk about, the power of one, everyone's involved. We have to be able to look at this holistically. And if you don't have a change management type of policy or procedure, try to implement one so that you do have that communication touch points. You understand who your stakeholders are. You're able to leverage that power of one and honestly leverage all this amazing material that Workday gives us every year. The fact that we are all able to have the conversations, add to the value. And I loved what you said. It's like, look, you're not going to do it perfect every time. There are going to be individuals on here that listen to this, and I'm going to say, look, even I have done things that I was like, holy crud muffins, I probably should have not clicked that checkbox because it sent out notifications to everyone. Yeah. It happens, and it's okay, because you know what? I bet if you go into community, you talk to somebody else, they've done the same thing. It's so easy to configure the system, and we forget the ripple effect sometimes. So keep that in mind. That's why we're having this conversation. That's why we've had you, Kelsey. Thank you for joining and just giving your insight and your knowledge. You are a powerhouse. I truly appreciate you. And this is by far one of my favorite ones is, look, we got cool new features. Let's uptake them. And if you have any questions, if you listen in, Kelsey and I are here to open our doors, give you free advice, help out as much as possible, because you're not the only one in this, and we're all in this together.
Exactly. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. I'm sure of it.